Whether you love or hate Troma, one thing most people can agree on is that the Toxic Avenger is actually a pretty damn fun film to watch. Yeah, most people I know that do not like Troma at least will enjoy Toxic Avenger. And I figured, what with a modestly sized budgeted remake coming out in the near future here, what better time to check out some unanswered questions about this guy. Questions about the first superhero from New Jersey. Question number 1. Can Toxie take off that tutu? So when Melvins Dad is tricked by the wicked Julie into putting on a pink tutu, which he calls sissy stuff, but let's face it, that's a look that anyone could pull off with the right amount of confidence. And he ends up headfirst in a vat of toxic waste, which of course transforms him into a hideously deformed mutant with superhuman size and strength. He's wearing the tutu when he falls in it, and he's still wearing it afterwards. From that point on, pretty much throughout all of the films, he's seen wearing it. But can he take it off? Well, I think it's pretty clear that he can't, and in fact, the tutu is now fused to him and is a part of his body. The only evidence that it's not is a scene in Toxic Avenger 3 in which Claire tells him to put on a fresh tutu! Beyond that, though, we have to consider that we never see him outside of it from the moment he's transformed. We see him wearing it at all times, including under other clothing, and he even wears it while having sex and while pooping. And I want to pause on this for a second, and I guess I apologize for doing so, but bear with me. He didn't even pull the tutu down to go to the bathroom. How does that even work? Think for a second that he can't take the suit off. So yeah, I get that. It's fused to his skin now. But can he, like, poo through it? Does that mean that the suit is now part of his body and he's technically naked all the time? How does he get his sexy parts out then? When we see him doing the deed, again, his pants aren't down and there's no little access hole for him or anything. So does he just grow out of it? Some questions were meant to be unanswered. But yeah, any way you slice it, the tutu stays on, and it's just a part of his body now, forever to be worn. Question number 2. Does Toxie kill Julianwanda? In the first film, Melvin's main antagonists, in a way, are the murderous gym quartet of Bozo, Slug, Julie, and Wanda. They're the ones who set him up in the first place that led to his accident, and they also like to run people over with their cars and photograph it. They're pretty evil. So, of course, after Melvin becomes the Toxic Avenger, they would be on his hit list of villains to take care of. And he does. And here's what we see. He takes out Wanda first, attacking her in the sauna and placing her rear end on the hot coals to cook, presumably killing her. He gets Julie next, stalking her with a pair of scissors, I guess using them to stab her, and later he gets Slug and Bozo in the same car and throws Slug out of it, causing him to land on the ground, and the impact kills him. The car then crashes and explodes, taking out Bozo. We see Bozo's dead body in the car, and we also see Slug land dead. But we're never shown either Wanda or Julie's death, which is weird because all of the rest of the deaths in this series are very explicitly shown. Why pass up the chance to show these characters get their comeuppance? Well, if you go by the extended version of the film, he didn't kill them after all. In fact, we see Wanda at the police station with gauze on her butt, but otherwise unharmed. Oddly, the gauze is over her underwear. But then Julie arrives, but bald now since Toxie, I guess, just used the scissors to cut off her hair. The two girls fight and are presumably arrested, but they're alive and never mentioned again. But why would he leave them alive? So here's the deal. The version with them alive in it is only the extended cut, not the director's cut or any other version. It's not intended to be a part of the film, which makes sense because Toxie not killing Julie or Wanda does not. They're cold-blooded killers. I could see him letting them live if, say, they had just been bullies and their only crimes were the ones they perpetuated against him, but they murdered folk. What they did was worse than, say, the drug dealer guy who was just selling drugs to people who wanted to buy drugs, and that guy got his head crushed. You're telling me that people who run kids' heads over and take pictures of it, then just get a haircut and an ouchie bum? Nah, he killed them off screen. And the way he killed them was so horrible that they couldn't even show it. So, ignore that deleted scene. It was deleted for a reason. Question number 3. Is that a special effect fail where you can see the actor's arm? This one is inspired by a good friend of mine and isn't really a question as much as it is a touch of fun trivia. There's a scene later on in the film in which a group of guys are robbing the diner, and one of them is Frank here, played by Larry Sultan. They attack and rob and kill there, and Toxie shows up to save the day, taking out the villains. In the process, while fighting, Toxie rips off Frank's arm, which takes him a second to notice. My friend paused the scene here to laugh at how poorly it was filmed and how painfully obvious it was that he's just pulled his arm into his shirt and is visibly moving right here. So is this just a big goof? Is it evidence of poor special effects? Well, no. Because, first of all, that's just a ripple in the shirt, an excess fabric moving around. It's clearly not Frank's arm. How do I know that? Well, because Larry Sultan is missing his right arm. They hired him based on this fact, and you can see this earlier in the scene. During the initial assault, he's clearly wearing a fake arm that remains stationary by his side and only uses his left hand for any of his actions, including several punches to Toxie. So, when the arm is torn off, it's simply the fake arm that had been added there. And I'm saying that like he normally would have ripped off his real arm or something, but there's no need to hide his real arm inside of his shirt. So any appearance of this being a bad effect is unintentional because it's pretty solid, actually. And speaking of solid, Sultan actually gave a pretty great performance as the wicked Frank, and I'm surprised he never went on to do anything else. Question number 4. Is Marisa Tomei really in this movie? It's long been told that a young Marisa Tomei appeared in the original Toxic Avenger, and this would have been the same year that she appeared in The Flamingo Kid, and just before landing a small run on a soap opera. It would still be 8 years until her breakout role in My Cousin Vinny, so her star hadn't really risen yet. But first off, you're saying, wait, Toxic Avenger was so long ago. What was she, like a baby in it or something? But no, she was 20 years old because Tomei is almost 60 years old now and just keeps getting lovelier. But she is here, although she might be hard to spot, mainly because when you look up people talking about it, including IMDb, it's stated that she's one of the extras in the scene where Melvin is tricked. But she's not there, or else if she is, she's lost in the crowd. But I'm pretty sure she's not here. Instead, she's much easier to find, but only if you realize that she's 20 years old and looks a bit different. She actually appears right here, right after Toxie first appears to Julie. He's strangling her and Marisa walks in on it and screams. Because of the contortion of her shocked face and screams, you'll look and say, oh, is that even really her? But it is. She's billed as Health Club Girl, and like around 30-some years later, would go on to team up with a different kind of superhero. One that doesn't rip faces off. But here's the thing, she's not the only famous face in these movies. She might be the most famous face here, but there's others. In the first movie, you have Leroy, one of the thugs in the diner scene, and he's played by Patrick Kilpatrick, who would then go on to appear in bigger things like Remo Williams, before becoming the main baddies in films like Class of 1999 and Scanner Cop 2, as well as the Tom Cruise flick Minority Report. Weirdly, he reappears as, I suppose, a different character later on in the film and dies again. Beyond that, the second film had another big name show up with Michael Hyde White, Black Dynamite himself. That's right, Spawn made his feature film debut as a henchman of Apocalypse Inc. in both Toxic Avenger 2 and 3. He first shows up in the big fight outside the Center for the Blind and flees before being killed, and appears throughout the films as one of the evil crew, with a few lines here and there. Plenty of other actors from the movies would also go on to great things, except for the guy who played Melvin in Part 3, Michael J. Kaplan. He never did anything after this, mainly because he had to go through this one time, and that was enough. I'm breaking in here because I'm editing this right now, and I have a conundrum because I keep looking at this over and over and over again. And is this Marisa Tomei? Every single website that I go to and every little bit of trivia seems to point to this being her. But the more I look at this face, the less that I see her. And when I compare it to the footage from the Flamingo Kid, which was in the same time frame, it looks like a different person. Now, here's the deal. When you talk about IMDb and the trivia and even a slideshow that was on the special edition, they point to Marisa appearing in the scene where they trick Melvin, and she's in a blue and pink striped bikini. Now, the only blue and pink striped bikini girl is this one right here, which you don't really see from the front right here. You only see her back, but in this later scene you can kind of see her face, and it looks like the same girl from the shower scene later. And then to top that all off, I'm pretty sure that that same girl is in the diner scene for one brief cutaway shot. This is it, but this appears to be the same girl. So I ask you, is this her?
Question number 5. What happened to the chief of police? The main villain of the first film is Mayor Belgoody, and he's a piece of work, but he finally gets his comeuppance in the end, and he gets his guts yanked out of his belly. But he's not alone in his evil deeds. He's shown to be in cahoots with the chief of police, whose name is apparently Himmel, and he's German. Now, this is the 80s, where if you had a German character, they were just generally evil. But Himmel goes a bit further than that. He speaks in a thick accent, often refers to the mayor as My Führer, and does the Nazi salute. So it's clear that this character is a Nazi. I guarantee that even with the character flat out doing the Nazi salute, there's guaranteed to be a handful of commenters saying things like, "Oh, how can you be sure he's a Nazi?" And I can guarantee you that every single one of those commenters have a very interesting browsing history. He also is shown to assist the mayor in all of his evil doings and is equally corrupt, but given his level of evilness, which is high because, well, Nazi, we don't see him get his just due on screen. So, what happened to him? He's there in the finale with everyone else, and the last we see of him is standing next to the army guy as Toxie is advancing on Belgoody. So, wouldn't he still set off his traumatons? Wouldn't Toxie want to destroy him? Well, yeah, but here's what we see. He's standing right here, and we never see him again, but the other two cohorts of the mayor are shown realizing the jig is up and exit stage right. It's assumed that Himmel went with them, as none of them show back up. I assume that Belgoody's evil was predominant as he was actively attacking Melvin and putting innocent lives at risk, so that was what Toxie was reacting to. And after the death of the mayor, the others had gotten far enough away to be out of range, giving them a safe distance away. So, does he get away? I don't think so. I think most likely he just went home, and considering we never see him again in any later movies, it can be assumed that he died. I know that the police chief in Toxie 4 is also a Nazi, but he's Sergeant Kaczynski, a totally different officer. Just because he's also a Nazi doesn't make him the same guy, considering recent investigations show a disturbingly increasing number of police officers with ties to hate group, so the fact that there's two here isn't really surprising. But No, we don't see him again, and Toxie probably caught up to him the next day, when he probably just tried to carry on doing things the way he always did, not realizing that his little world of evil was about to come crashing down. Because one thing that we can rely on is Nazis being really, really stupid. Question number 6. What's up with the name changes in part 2? In the first film, Melvin's name is given right off the bat, and he's
Melvins.
Later on in the movie, he meets the woman who will become his girlfriend, and her name is Sarah. You know this because he says it about 900 times in the finale.
Sarah! Melvin! Sarah! Melvin! Sarah! Melvin! Sarah!
But then, in the second movie, for some reason, we're now told that Toxie's full name is
Melvin Junko.
Weirder still, when we meet his girl, she's now called Claire. She also acts totally different, but then again, so does he. But is she a different person? Is Sarah a different person than Claire? Did he get a new girlfriend, who is also just blonde and just happens to be blind? Now, there's some stipulation that the name became Junko because of the interest of the Japanese market, and they used that to appeal more to them, but the actual answer comes from the source. Lloyd Kaufman himself addresses this in his book, All I Need to Know About Filmmaking I Learned from the Toxic Avenger, where he directly states, "In the Toxie sequels, we changed the name of Toxie's girlfriend from Sarah to Claire. I have repeatedly racked my brains to remember why we did this, but I don't have the faintest." Well, honestly, here on UQ, we don't really care about the actual behind-the-scenes reason for things as much as we do about making things up to make them make sense on screen, so that's what we're doing here anyway. The easiest explanation for this comes from the fourth film, which restores their names back to the first films, and in the introduction tells us that this is the real sequel. This seems to imply that these two films don't exist, but instead are on their own, and that's what I'm going with. Toxic Avenger 2 and 3 are an alternate reality that exist by themselves. The events of the first film happened, but in a slightly different way. Plus, we'll get into it a bit later on, but there's a chance that the second and third movies are their own things in regards to each other, but we'll get to that. So, anyway, we know that there's alternate universes out there from the fourth film, and in some of those universes, Sarah is named Claire. Parts 2 and 3 are just another of those universes. This also actually explains another odd inconsistency as well. In the first film, a minor villain is Cigar Face. He survives an encounter with Toxie, but returns with a group of other guys, but is killed by a gunshot. We're shown his body on the ground and he's pretty seemingly dead. But then he's back in the second film with no explanation, and it's him. He looks the same and acts the same, so he's the same character. I know that Dan Snow, the actor, is also back in part 4 playing a new character who kind of seems similar, but he's named Sergeant Kaczynski, so he's probably somebody new. But this guy's clearly Cigar Face. He's even listed in the credits as Cigar Face, so it's him and he's still alive. And oddly, he's not shown to be killed here, so he lives on. But how did he survive the first film? Simple. Alternate universe. In the timelines of parts 2 and 3, he didn't die. Either he wasn't shot in that alley or it was a less fatal wound. So, somewhere in the universe out there, Cigar Face is still on the loose, I guess, putting cigars in people's faces. Question number 7. What happened to Melvin's dad? At the ending of part 2, Melvin's dad returns. He had not known how to find them, but is reunited with his estranged wife and son after so long, and it seems to be a very happy reunion. But then, in the third film, he's not present, and in fact isn't even mentioned, and isn't there at Toxie and Claire's wedding. So where did he go? Well, this sets up a couple of things I want to talk about, and instead of having several questions with the same answer, it's all here. So, here's the thing. Parts 2 and 3 were never meant to be 2 movies. It was one big film, but Lloyd shot way too much footage and realized his film was close to 3 hours long. So, in order to take advantage of that fact, they announced that they were making a third film. raised some extra funds, and got a separate distribution deal and made it 2 movies. In order to make this work, some things had to be edited around. Because of this, certain things don't make sense between the 2 movies. One of these things is the fact that Melvins Dad vanishes. Another is that even though Toxie takes on the Apocalypse crew in part 2, he then goes to interview with them in part 3 and acts like he's never heard of them before. There's even scenes that completely repeat, like this boardroom bit. So here's the thing, we're already dealing with alternate reality and multiple timelines. I think the only answer here is that this is another instance of that. It's tempting to have some other sort of reason like mind control or memory wipes or anything, but the boardroom scene is what tells me that this is a whole separate reality. We're seeing the events that take place in 2 different manners in 2 separate universes. It's clear that some things happened here, since in part 3 they refer to the sumos, but there's just too many things that don't line up and disappear to think that this is all one set of events. Question number 8. Then why didn't Apocalypse Incorporated activate his traumatons? So regardless of whether or not the 3rd film is in a separate continuity as part 2, something is up. There's at least a reason why Toxie would straight up want to take a job with Apocalypse after he's fully aware that they were the ones that blew up the Center for the Blind, as well as took over the town while he was in Japan. In this version of things, he didn't know. That didn't happen. But both parts 1 and 2 established that Toxie has a sort of spider sense in the form of his traumatons. They're his toxic irradiated cells that tell him that evil is around and compels him to destroy it. He can't help himself. In the 2nd film, he feels the presence of the evil girl from like a block away, so it's pretty strong. Meanwhile, in part 3, he goes to their offices and talks directly to the director, and nothing happens. Later, he's on stage surrounded by evil goons, and nothing. He just goes along with it like it's no big deal. So, why didn't they activate his traumatons? Well, there's multiple things going on here. First off, it's possible that since we've established that this might be in its own little continuity, that his traumatons work differently here. But secondly, and this is the most important part, the chairman is the devil. And he's shown to have a wide range of powers at his disposal, including being able to transform Toxie back into regular old Melvin. So, with that in mind, it's pretty easy to say that one of his abilities is suppressing Toxie's traumaton reactions. That would explain why Toxie wouldn't listen when the crowd seemed to be so upset that he was working with them. They didn't set off his tons, so they couldn't be evil or else he'd be destroying them. Question number 9. What happened to Kabuki Man? We first meet Sergeant Kabuki Man, NYPD, in his own film of the same name. In that film, he's Sergeant Harry Griswold, who ends up imbued with the Kabuki spirit, giving him an assortment of mystical powers and abilities to fight crime. He teams up with the lovely Lotus, who trains him and becomes his girlfriend over the course of the film. That was the last that we saw of him for quite a while, until he reappeared in Toxic Avenger 4. There, he is shown to have bottomed out, and is first seen drunk in a dumpster being inappropriate with a reporter. Later on, he's always shown to be more and more drunk, completely ineffective, and pretty idiotic. So what happened? How did he become so crap? Well, first of all, it's questionable he's even the same guy. He's much smaller than he was previously, and his voice is entirely different. No one refers to him as Harry, even though his identity didn't seem to be a big secret in his own movie. I would hazard a guess that this is no longer Harry Griswold based on his actions. Most likely, for whatever reason, Harry had to give up the power of Kabuki Man, possibly due to his death or possibly just retirement, passing them on to another member of the police force in the years in between the 2 films. As shown in the first film, it's not always a decision made with forethought, since Harry himself was a last-ditch effort. So it's possible that whoever the powers were passed into was not really an appropriate candidate. Having such abilities and responsibilities were clearly a bit too much to handle, causing him to hit rock bottom and become the shambles of a man that you see here. Question number 10. Is the Toxic Crusaders canon?
This is a really easy answer, and I'm not sure that it's a question that most people even really have, since I don't even think that there's some huge awareness of the Toxic Crusaders anyway. But hey, it's my show and I wanted to talk about it, so here we go. Back in 1991, 2 years after Toxic Avenger 3 had come out, Troma decided to go a different route with the property. Since Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were all the rage and cartoons with an environmental message were gaining steam, the Toxic Crusaders animated show was born. It brought Toxie, the ultra-violent and chock full of nudity film series, to a kids-friendly animated venue, which is something that I'm sure made sense to someone. It was syndicated, so the networks it ran on fluctuated, but it only lasted one season with 13 episodes. But which continuity did it exist in? Is it canon to anything? Well, no, not at all. Pretty easy answer. You can pretty much suss this out just from reading the synopsis, which states that Melvin's name is Junko and his girlfriend's name is Claire, so it's clearly not in line with either the first or fourth movie. It also shows Melvin's origin story in the first episode, and it's fairly different than the one we've seen before. There's all new bullies that chase him off, although the events are kind of similar, but they're also pretty different, establishing it as separate from the movie versions. But wait, you may say, what about the second or third movies? Couldn't it be in one of those continuities, since you're saying parts 2 and 3 are each their own continuities? Since we didn't see his origin in either of those, perhaps this show is in one of those universes. Well, I also doubt that, mainly because on the show, Toxie has a whole team called the Toxic Crusaders, and they're nowhere to be seen or even mentioned. You would think that that would be something he would discuss at some point. Plus, his mop is actually also mutated and is alive in the show, something that isn't the same in the movies, which indicates again that this is its own thing. And that thing is fairly shoddily animated. So there you have it, 10 questions and answers about the Toxic Avenger. Toxie, the first superhero from New Jersey, the hideously deformed creature of superhuman size and strength, the official mascot of Troma. If you enjoyed these answers and these questions, please let me know down below. If you have any additional questions about the Toxic Avenger series, please put those down below there as well. If you're looking forward to the new movie, let me know. I may possibly have seen part of it. I don't know, maybe. And it looks all right. So we'll see how it is. But yeah, of course, if you like the video, please hit the like button. If you enjoy what you see on the channel, you're going to want to subscribe and click that subscribe button and hit that bell so you get notified about new videos. And if you think about it, go check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. I know I'd appreciate that. And yeah, you can help support the channel. Be pretty awesome. But in the meantime, just tune on again, come back for another great video. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.